Among Martine's many, many accomplishments, she has also founded a religion that believes that one day we will literally conquer death by uploading our minds to computers. That might sound somewhat crazy, fantastical to some of us, but several decades ago, she visited a NASA tracking station in the Seychelles Islands and had this idea that what if we could connect the world through satellites? That too probably seemed pretty fantastical and crazy in the 1970s. It was less crazy when she went on to found SiriusXM. Now the CEO of United Therapeutics, she has been called by New York Magazine the trans-everything CEO, transhumanist, transgender, and we're here to talk about both of those things, but first about the future of medicine. So first, Martine, tell us the story of your midlife career change and how you came to move from SiriusXM to found United Therapeutics.
Sure, Derek. We have, Bean and my partner and I, we have 4 children, and our youngest daughter, Genesis, on a ski trip, suddenly ran out of all breath, and as we returned home, her lips started turning blue. We went to several doctors, and finally at Children's National Medical Center here in Washington, she was diagnosed with a rare and uniformly fatal disease called pulmonary arterial hypertension. The head of pediatric cardiology there, Dr. Ruckman, he told us there was no cure for the disease and she would need to be listed for transplant, but that the odds of getting a pediatric lung transplant were not good. I myself knew just from general knowledge that when you have an organ transplant, you're kind of trading one disease for a bit of another many times, the disease of chronic rejection. So at first I sort of hoped things would get better, but they didn't. And then I tried to donate money to some foundations to come up with a cure, but nothing was happening, and she was in the intensive care ward more than she was out. So I began to just pour my entire life's energy into finding a cure for Genesis. And ultimately, I was able to find a molecule that had a possibility of being developed into a treatment. And I quit SiriusXM, threw all of my effort into developing this medicine, hiring clinical drug specialists and drug manufacturing specialists to help me. And today, our daughter is 30 years old. She works in our company, helping everybody else work together to develop more cures for other people. And we have saved the lives of literally tens of thousands of other people with this illness. So I'm just tremendously grateful for the good fortune and the many good people and being born and living here in the United States that have been able to accomplish this.
And it's true that you had not... When you went to found United Therapeutics, you had not taken a biology class since the middle of high school?
Derek, that's true. My last one was 10th grade biology at Fairfax High School. And so when I was spending
Fairfax, California, we should say. Right?
Yeah, Fairfax Avenue and Melrose in Southern California. And so what I had to do, Derek, was there was, before the internet, there were these things called like Reader's Guide to Periodicals that indexed all of the medical journals and other journals. So I would look in them under the name pulmonary hypertension, since that's what the doctors called it. I would go from there to a college medical textbook, from there to a college biology textbook, and I just kind of went back and forth until I understood the field.
I want to move on to gene sequencing, which you're really interested in, and the price of which has come down tremendously, I think tenfold in the last decade or so. How do you see the development of gene sequencing particularly changing the future of medicine?
There's a new field, Derek, that's known as pharmacogenomics, and it's based on the idea that each person's response to a pharmaceutical is different depending on the unique genome that each one of us has. And even identical twins, during the course of their life, they have epigenetic factors that modify their genomic expression a bit. So everybody responds to drugs a little bit differently. And if we can determine the differences in the way people will respond to a drug, then we won't have to waste time having people take a drug that's not likely to work for them And clinical drug developers, such as ourselves, can do much smaller clinical trials by including only people in the clinical trial who are most likely to respond to the drug.
Would that require, in order for people to buy the drug that is suitable for them based on what is proved to be effective for that drug and the gene sequencing of the individual consumers, would that mean that basically everybody in this future would have to have their gene sequenced?
Derek, it does, but I don't think it's really like such a future. The cost of sequencing the human genome has gone from $1 billion plus, which was spent during the Clinton administration to sequence the first genome, and down to the fact that you can sequence a genome now for $1,000, and it's descending in price quickly. I would say that there's pretty universal agreement among people such as our partners in synthetic genomics and other people in the gene sequencing field that a $100 genome is right around the corner. At that point, I think you're going to start seeing the American Medical Association and other groups of physicians saying it is, basic medical practice that physicians should sequence all of their patients' genomes, both to have an alert as to any known problems and to be prepared for the coming age of pharmacogenomics. Insurance companies, I think, will gladly pay $100 to have somebody's genome sequenced to instead save spending thousands of dollars on the patients taking a drug that's not likely to work for them. Now, I want to hasten to add one thing, Derek, that even more important than just sequencing the genome is the bioinformatic analysis that goes along with that genome. And I tell people today one of the absolute greatest fields for young people to go into is bioinformatics. Understanding and analyzing and computer modeling how the genome interacts with other molecules, that's really going to give us the secret of how each person will respond differently to each drug.
You recently wrote a book, Virtually Human, that talks about the rights of yet-to-be-created cyberhumans. Cyberhumans don't exist today. How do you see us getting from here to the development of cyberhumanity?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Derek. What's been really amazing to me during the 21st century in particular is how more and more of our life, more and more of the contents of our mind are being poured into big data repositories, be it our Facebook and other social media postings, or e-commerce decisions, be it Amazon or Lyft or Uber, our YouTube, our videos, dash cams in our cameras, looking out, looking in, video surveillance all around us. And it's clear that we're creating a digital simulacra of our lives in the big data server repositories throughout the country. At the very same time, the hottest area of software development is what I call mindware, software that replicates more and more aspects of the human mind and the human personality. We see this today with Siri, and every company is trying to develop software that will sort of out-Siri Siri. So as you get this mindware development more and more closely approximating our personality and have the ability to tune it to the personality reflected in each person's data, which I call their mind file, and that's what's stored up in big data, it will be inevitable that there will be digital replicas of ourselves that sound like ourselves, think like ourselves, perhaps even feel like ourselves. And these cyber-conscious continuations of ourselves, when the body physically begins to go out, say beginning with things like dementia or Alzheimer's, these cyber-conscious continuations of ourselves will claim that they are ourselves, and they have a right to continue our activities as a citizen.
For people who have seen the movie Her and might not immediately grasp cyberhumanity, how close is having seen Her to understanding cyberhumanity? Is that essentially what you're talking about, having a digital replication of yourself that essentially is a human being accessed through a device like a phone? Or how much different is it?
Yes, I think Her was really quite realistic, except for the part at the end where all the Hers just disappeared because they were bored with people. I think,
it was dramatically necessary,
it was
but
dramatically
not
necessary, but I think that part was
realistic.
not realistic. However, I think what's a little bit more likely is that the Hers will be, instead of just a generic Her, people will want there to be a Derek Her. and a Martine her that will reflect our unique personality and be able to handle a lot of the multitasking which we're overwhelmed with today.
This is going to be very interesting in terms of maybe the future of ethicists and philosophers talking about narcissism potentially, but you're really interested in the legal side of this.
Exactly, because to me there's a philosophical question of whether or not a digital doppelganger of oneself is really just kind of a fancy digital puppet, or is it a sentient being that actually has values and has internal feelings about the world? So that philosophical question can go on forever. And literally only God knows whether or not there is really a mind there or if it's just like a black box. However, the legal system will come in between. And the legal system today makes decisions. Does a chimp actually have an interior consciousness and a sense of feelings and sadness that should prevent it being used for medical tests? Do dogs have those feelings? Do cats? Do mice? We can debate this philosophically forever, but the law has come in and pretty much said chimps do have that interiority to them, and you cannot do those medical experiments on chimps. Dogs have enough of a sentience to them that it is a crime to throw a dog out a window. And of course, I agree with all of those points of view. So I think the law will come in at some point and say that, this cyber-conscious individual has been interviewed by a panel of psychologists for over a year, and this panel of psychologists has compared digital video of the individual when they had their mind with this, what I call a mental wheelchair, this cyber-conscious analog, and they've all sworn that this cyber-conscious being is the real being. So as a secular legal system, we have to grant this cyber-conscious being the legal rights of their predecessor.
You came out as transgender in 1994, which culturally was a very different time for transgendered people than the one that we're living in right now. What was it like coming out in 1994, and how do you compare America then to what we've seen in the last year and a half with the popularization of Orange is the New Black, with Caitlyn Jenner? How do you contrast these two periods?
Yeah, it's a fascinating period of time to have lived through. In 1994, under the Clinton administration at that time, there was a law passed, the Defense of Marriage Act, which is not really what it sounds like. But Bina, my partner, and I, we'd been married for already 12 or 13 years. And suddenly we wondered, were we not married anymore? Legally, were we considered now a same-sex marriage, which could not be a marriage?
Right.
And people thought, of course, it was very strange and awful and wrong. One of my legal colleagues in Washington, D.C., a great individual, said to me, "How could you do this to your children?" So it was a tough time. But ironically, in the business world, I faced general acceptance. And no doubt it was because I had a track record of success. I had a reservoir of love and support from my family. My parents were very accepting. All of our 4 children were accepting. My best friends were accepting. So I had this reservoir of strength, and I was able to present myself positively. I'll always remember this one Wall Street banker who said to me, "Martine, you look different. I don't care, though, if you're a man or a woman. In fact, I don't care if you come to work in a gorilla suit, as long as you keep making money for me."
Yeah.
So I have to say I've never had a gorilla suit in my wardrobe. But the business world was more or less accepting, and I've been able to take 2 companies public, and it's not been a problem.
I also want to ask about this particular moment. 2 things. First, I think that the popularization of Caitlyn Jenner, I think, has for some people been a wonderful way of mainstreaming this concept, of making people familiar with something they just weren't familiar with before. And I want to hear what you have to say about that. I also want you to comment on the fact that there's been a lot of profiles written about you in the last few years, and they all seem to make the same sentence comment, that you are the highest paid female CEO in America, but born a man. And how does that make you feel?
So the first part of your question about Caitlin, it's been wonderful for transgender people. Caitlin coming out and Laverne Cox being on the cover of Time magazine. But frankly, even those great high watermarks, I think, pale compared to the fact that the President of the United States, President Obama, lets it come right out of his mouth to ask for equal respect for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people. That has done more, I think, to change the country's zeitgeist, if you will.
You said earlier he used the T word.
He used the T word no other president ever had, and he doesn't even trip over it. It's like no big deal. Transgender, you know? So that really has cleared the way. It has been beautiful, though, to have people who are usually sort of middle-aged people who I don't even know come up to me and just say, I've watched Caitlin's show. She's so wonderful. Now I understand what you've gone through. My life is, of course, not her life, but she's been great for all of us in the LGBT community. Now, with regard to the people saying that I am a woman but a man, this is kind of inherent to being transgendered, and I understand that it's the way that everybody would see it. The way most transgender people look at themselves, it's more nuanced. We sort of see ourselves as occupying a space like somewhat between male and female, and some people are very much at one end of that space, some people are very much at the other. But one thing I say in virtually every interview, I don't know if it always gets in, is that it is much, much more difficult than it is for me. I was, a firstborn male, and my parents always had the highest expectations for me, as did society. So it's not a fair comparison. It's not apples to apples. But having been an apple, I'm happy to be an orange today.
Martine, thank you. Thank you.